thought about having this be like a political episode, but I felt like that would be like a 4-part episode that we would just like go on and on. So I figured
Forever.
we'll
Yes.
go back to that. Like we'll see how everything goes down.
Well, yeah. You had said you wanted to deal with the high school years.
Yeah.
In
So,
our meeting,
yes.
getting together.
Yep.
What specifically, or where do you want me to begin?
Yeah. So I was going back and reading some of the chapters that kind of cover junior high and high school, and so you moved to Nelson Avenue in 2nd grade, right?
I'm sorry?
You moved to Nelson Avenue in 2nd grade after you left your grandparents, right?
Yeah.
And so then you lived there until you got married.
Right. So by the time where I was graduating, my last year of 8th grade, which I guess is like junior high, which actually went to 9th grade in a lot of the schools in the city. But our public school went to 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
When we reached 6th grade, we sort of departmentalized. So we had the various classes. At around that time, one of my girlfriends was dating somebody who brought Marvin around the neighborhood. And at that particular time, my Aunt Lil was babysitting Carol and myself. And when she looked out the window and she said, "I like that tall redhead out there. I think you should marry him." And I said, "Well, I've met him. My girlfriends are crazy about him, and I think he's a conceited SOB." And that was the beginning.
How old were you?
I was, I don't know, 8th grade, whatever that would be.
Yeah.
So,
14.
13, 14, 15, yeah, because he actually came to my 15th birthday, as I recall, birthday party for my friends. And in those days, it reminded me also, thinking about 15th and then 16th birthday, they had corsages.
Right.
For the 15th, it was Charming 15. And so the corsage was made with little candy charms hanging from it. And 16th was Sweet 16 with sugar cubes hanging from it. And that was given out at that particular, age. That was the standard gift to the person who was going through that particular age.
And so would that be something that like your parents bought you?
Yeah, parents or sometimes friends would make.
Okay.
So, yeah. So it was something a little different that sort of fell out of fashion. And when I mentioned this to somebody down here, they had never heard of it. So maybe it was a New York thing. I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I've only heard of them for like dances and like.
Yeah, well, we had, you would get a corsage from a guy if you're going to the prom or, something like that.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wait. So, I have to. You talked about like you made your 8th grade dress as part of your home ec.
Oh yes, having to. Yes, that's the dress that I made.
This was you were in 8th grade here.
Yes, I look very mature.
Yeah.
By the time I was 8th grade, it was the same height that I am now.
Okay.
I didn't grow after that.
Yeah, I was
So
like,
it was about 5'6" at that point.
Yeah,
Well, maybe
that could be your
5'5".
like high school picture or whatever.
No, that's totally different.
So, but you said that, so you made that in home ec,
Yes.
and then, but you had your grandpa fix it, right?
Yeah, what happened was I could get the whole thing together without any problem, except I didn't like the way the top and the skirt attached. I didn't feel it laid flat and was even. So I took it to my grandfather. Uh, Both my grandfathers were tailors. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah.
But the one who did women's clothes had already passed. So it was the guy who did men's clothes who fixed the seam for me and made it smooth. That was the only thing I asked him to do, is to, take it apart and put it back together again, because it didn't feel like it was laying flat. And he did that, and it worked fine.
Yeah, I mean it looks beautiful. I think, I mean, I didn't take home ec in 8th grade. I don't even remember what we did in 7th grade, but I know I did not keep it after that. It
Well, they
didn't.
had a sewing class, and they also had a cooking class, and we would learn to make, various dishes. And I remember my 8th grade teacher, Mrs. Freed, I think it was her name, Sarah Freed, uh, had gotten sick, and so the home ec teacher made a cake for her, and a group of us went to see her at her home, uh, to wish her well, because she was going to be coming back soon, and so on and so forth. Nothing contagious. Um, and when she went to cut the cake, she couldn't cut the cake. It was like a sponge cake, literally like a sponge. It wouldn't cut. So we all had a good time laughing about it, and she made us promise we would not tell the cooking teacher, what happened with her cake. But the kids got a big kick out of it, so we did spread the story.
Yeah. That's embarrassing to not be able to.
Yes. It was like a sponge, you just could not cut through it. I don't know what she did to it. I've never seen a cake like that.
Yeah. Interesting. So, so you, so what, like, you didn't go to the same high school, did you go to the same high school as like most of your friends, or what was like the high school situation from going from 8th grade to high school?
Uh, there were options.
Did you freeze? Are you there?
Oh, we
You're back.
lost each other there. What happened?
I don't know.
Okay, it came back. Okay, where was I?
All right. So I cut off at there were options.
Oh, yeah. Uh, so most of my friends, there were a few who went to an all girls high school, Walton, or an all boys high school, Clinton. And I myself was offered options to go to some of the more scholastically prestigious schools, which I turned down. I wanted to be with my friends at Taft. So I went to Taft, and that's where Marvin went also. And I guess we, started dating around that time, on and off. And our first date was at the same place that I graduated from public school, which was the Paradise Theater up on the concourse,
Right?
which was a huge place that had stars on the ceiling, and things like that. It was very fancy on the inside. uh, the high school graduation. Uh, our first date was a movie up there. I think it was something about petty girls or something like that, about models and things like that. And from there, we walked all the way down to 161st Street. And I think I may have told you about the Addie Valens going to that ice cream parlor and having our first disagreement with regard to whether or not I should have ordered what I ordered. It was not the most expensive thing on the menu, despite what he said. Anyway, what else do you want to know about that? The high schools, interestingly, Taft was about like across the street from where I had lived originally when we lived with my grandparents.
Okay.
So it was like going back to the my old neighborhood.
Right.
But most of my friends wound up there, and while there, I was involved uh, with I got involved with the honor society. So I spent time teaching uh, or helping to teach other kids in my free time. If they had problems with various classes, I worked in the counselor's offices. Um, they didn't have very much in the way of um, teams and stuff for women at that time. They had a terrific high school team and a baseball team for the guys.
Right. They didn't have to at that point yet.
That's when I started playing ball with the Alpines. I started at the end, before I got to high school for about a year or so, part of their program. I ultimately played first base with them. I think I told you we were city champions and beat the boys teams and that kind of thing. We had a lot of fun. It was interesting times. I mention it now because in high school I wrote a paper about one of our coaches who was the first woman umpire accredited by the AAU. And she was a little 5'4" person who used to umpire these industrial league games. And you could see her arguing with the 6'3", guy, telling you're out, and one more word, you're out of the game, kind of thing. But when I wrote about it, um, it was one of the honors classes, and I had spoken to the teacher about it afterward. I said to her that, how did she feel about my writing about stuff like that when a lot of the other people in the class were writing, all sorts of very fancy stories? And she said, don't change. She says, they're writing what they think I want. You're writing what you know and you're doing it well. So keep doing what you're doing. And I began to feel more confidence in my writing at that particular point.
So were you doing a lot of writing before that, like when you were in like elementary school or junior high or anything like that?
Uh, in school, basically, yes, but not necessarily, writing on the side in a sense. I
So
did that later on, yeah.
right. So is that kind of like that teacher kind of pushed you to do it as an extracurricular kind of thing?
She did, and then later on, one of the professors I had at Hunter, Dr. Bowden, who was a terrific lady, used to meet with me after class, and we would talk about, writing. And she felt that I should continue it, and I did some, and I still have some things that I may have written back then. I'm not sure. But I've always enjoyed writing. When I was in about fourth or fifth grade in elementary school, I belonged to uh, the library club at our public library. They had not a class, but they started a club. And none of my friends joined. I did. I wound up writing a play that I performed in as King something or other. I don't know. We learned to make crossword puzzles. We learned all sorts of word games, and helped out, and sometimes in the library before the meetings began. So it was interesting. I've always been interested in reading.
So that was the play you have that picture of, right? That you did that library club?
There was a picture of the library, I believe. Yeah.
Or I think, well, yeah. That's the library, right?
That's the library. Yeah.
Okay. But I think didn't you have a picture? Didn't you guys put on a play?
It's possible.
Had 85 years to remember. It's a long time.
I'm amazed that I've remembered as much as I have.
I don't know. I'm like, I don't know if I remember all of this. Where was it? I know I saw it.
I guarantee none of it is made up. It is for real.
Okay. I know I saw it. I will find it.
A lot of the stuff that I will be writing about now will be the Florida years, which I haven't, I got sidetracked on, is I have, and I think I've always kept for a long time, these little calendars, little book calendars that fit in my pocketbook, and with little notes of, what's happened when, this day, that day, and they bring back memories along with the photographs. So.
Right. Oh yeah, I remember. Didn't you do? Oh, here it is. This one, right?
Yes, that was the library, one of the library, library experience, along
Yeah.
with my girlfriends that you saw there. Yes.
Right. I remember you because you used to make, going back to the other thing you're talking about, the calendars, because you used to make calendars with like everybody's picture and like their birthdays, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember those.
Should I go back to that? That's, yeah. I probably need your updates now because I don't remember all the birthdays and stuff anymore. So it's, yeah, I actually I keep one of the old ones that I use to remind myself of people's, I don't know if you can see it,
Oh yeah, 1994.
1994. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know why calendars were always so important in my life, but I always felt that it should be recorded. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's good that you have them because then you can reference back to them. And I don't.
It's the
My
historian.
reference back is Facebook, so I don't know.
These days, yeah, it's a little different. I think it's, as I say, partially the historian in me. I told you, I believe that my father had me arguing politics with him from the time I was about 10 years old, argument for argument's sake. And I've always enjoyed it. So,
No, it makes sense. So,
yeah,
no, were you going to say something?
no, I know. I was asking, you were talking about the high school.
Yeah.
What else did you want to know about there?
So what kind of student were you in high school? Like you were in the honor society, you took honors classes, you said? So
Yeah. It how do I describe it? Most of the classes in English, history, etc., were all honors classes. We had some terrific teachers. There was I forget his name at the moment, but we would be discussing Shakespeare, and he would be reading a part from Shakespeare. He'd stand up on his desk and emote. It was a little chubby guy with glasses and a mustache, and always struck me funny. But he was terrific, with it. We had some very good teachers. Um, and speaking of teachers, I think I had mentioned in my book that when I started high school there, a lot of the gals didn't like me because I was tying up Marvin, who was considered to be, a popular guy. Um, and for some reason, my homeroom teacher uh, got into some disagreement with him, and she was cool to me, and I mentioned it to him, and he came in and chewed her out, and after that, she was very pleasant to me. It's that kind of thing. It was a weird setup. I don't know. Um, but in high school, as I say, I did work with the counselors as well. I also was very active in the gym classes, being an athlete. Uh, and in between classes, or if I had some free time, would play volleyball against the teachers that were there in between classes. One kept knocking down up at the playing against each other up at the net, had knocked down a couple of the gals, and she felt very superior. So I decided it was time to teach her a lesson. So I went up against her and knocked her down. Right at the time that the head of the department, who was a little lady, was walking through, and she just gave me a smile with a thumbs up, and that was it. No, nothing happened after that.
So
But I
you
used
mentioned something about not being able to play softball, right? Was that in your gym classes? Was that junior high or was that high school?
uh, in both. The girls were not given the opportunity to play anything really, other than something like a kickball kind of thing or whatever. For some reason, even in elementary school, I convinced them to let us try softball with a like a rubber ball, a bigger rubber ball. And one of the teachers, in showing how it was to be done, managed to swing and hit her ankle, and it blew up. And that ended that. Uh, I've never seen so many clutches in my life. Uh, but I enjoyed the sport. And when I found the Alpines, um, it was it got me away from playing on the boys' teams, the neighborhood boys' teams.
Right. So how long did you play on the Alpines?
With the Alpines, I started probably about 5 or 6 years. Because I started when I was still in elementary school and played through my junior year in high school.
And why'd you stop?
I just felt I had other things to do and I didn't have the time for it.
What were the other things that you were doing?
Beginning to getting close to entering college, needed to find a job. So I did when my grocer's daughter, who had a job, was graduating and asked me if I wanted to work for a doctor. And that's when I went to work for her. And we became friends even after I stopped working now. And after my kids were born, I used to take them into the city, even after we moved out of the city for about a year or two. And we kept in touch from time to time. So, and I used to babysit, as I think I mentioned, her kids. So,
Right. Yeah. So, what kind of student you were? Like, what kind of like were you like a straight A student, or were you like just kind of coasting by? Like, what kind of student were you?
and enough to be in the honor society, my grades were high enough. I wasn't straight A, and there were some things I didn't like chemistry or some of the math classes. I didn't understand the laws of probability until somebody outside of school explained it to me, and then it all of a sudden made sense. But we had some teachers who were not that good at teaching, as far as I was concerned. if they couldn't explain it to me, there was something wrong with them, not with me. So, and that was my attitude. Um, and I'm trying to think of, some of these specifics.
Yeah, what were your favorite classes that you remember, or your favorite teachers?
There were many that I liked. Um, one of the gym teachers I felt very close to. Always felt that I was too serious and I should have more fun. I told her I really did. I said, but it was difficult in gym because I was what they call the senior leader. Um, if everybody else wore the blue uh, gym suits, I wore a gold one and led the class in calisthenics and things like that. So it set me apart from the rest of the kids who resented it. And, I understood that. But that was the job that I was doing. It was the same like being in the honor society. There are kids who resented the fact that I had more time, or to myself in a sense, from their perspective. Well, it's because I learned faster. It, I couldn't help that. That's the way it was. But I was able to help other students, and that was good in my whatever free time I had then. So it I don't know how to describe it, but I had my usual group of friends that didn't change, and the others didn't bother me. Graduating from high school, I won the gold medal for athletics. I was a member of the Honor Society. Uh, so it was brawn and brains combination, which is difficult. And dating Marv also, as I say, taking him out of circulation created problems
Right.
uh, with some of uh, uh, the clique, the social clique there.
Did you fight
But
anybody about it? Like, did
did I what?
you fight anybody over like?
No, no. That was something I ignored because I didn't think it was worth the time to do. Uh, we were too busy. My friends and I would go, oh, how do I describe it? All places around the city, through high school, etc. We go ice skating. We go. I'm thinking about roller skating one night, but ice skating I remember going. We went to Rockefeller Center because it was something we hadn't done. It was froze our butts off down there, but it was, you know, once we had to do it. We would go down to places like Greenwich Village. We saw some comedian who, I'm trying to remember his name, Theodore, who felt that the world was going crazy. It had to get back down to all fours and drink oleo de canis, dog oil. It was some comic, just a weird, kind of night. And as we were leaving his show, some guy came up to us, opened up his jacket, and wanted to sell us a whole bunch of jewelry. That was New York City. That's the way it was. And it was a fun place to explore. Um, we did things like go across the river to the Palisades amusement park, where you could ride the roller coaster, which was my first and last roller coaster ride. I wound up with a stiff neck, but it looked like at certain points that you would like be going out over the river. When you came down fast and did the turn. So it fascinated me. We went to places like the Roxy and Paramount theaters in New York City, where they also had a stage show. At that time, I think I went with my mother's cousin, one of her younger cousins, and saw the Andrews sisters sing, who were very big at that particular time. And Louis Prima and Keely Smith was the other act that I remember. I can't tell you what the movies were. You know, gone from my mind. We went to most of the museums. Um, the Museum of the City of New York is where I learned that when I was telling the story to somebody the other day about when New York, oh, when I went to the doctor, we were talking about New York City. And I said to him that when the Indians sold Manhattan Island to the Dutch when they came for $24, I found out at the museum that the Indians who sold the land to the Dutch actually lived in Brooklyn and were just fishing there for the summer and sold somebody else's land. That's New York City for me. But it's the kinds of things that fascinated me, and I think we hit every museum possible during those years. My friends and I would. I didn't know there was a fire department museum. It told the history of the old horse-drawn carts and things like that.
Hmm.
Um, but we, loved exploring it. I'm trying to think of where else the Museum of Natural History with the Hayden Planetarium, always fascinating, the shows. So, yeah, we did all sorts of things. And as far as uh, the classes and things and teachers, uh, I can't describe it. It was a fun time for me at the same time, absorbing all of this nonsense that someday would be written about by me. Uh, why? It's the historian in me. I had heard from my father when I was young that the family, his father's family, dated all the way back to Aaron, and there was a long line of rabbis. And so I thought that's historic significance. Women didn't count though because they don't in Orthodox Judaism.
Right.
So that's when I think I decided that I was not going to be an Orthodox Jew. I would switch to Reform Judaism where women were considered equal. And that goes, as I say, back to probably pre-high school.
So was your family, would you consider them Orthodox, or were they more Reform, like, already? Like what?
Uh, it's, uh, I'd say my mother's family really uh, considered themselves Orthodox, but I never really saw them take part that much because it was mostly, run by women, and there was to them no place, for that kind of thing. So I do remember my grandmother, as I said, lighting the candles on Friday nights and things like that. And they honored as much as they could with the knowledge that they had, but they didn't delve deeply into any of it, really, as far as I was concerned. My mother, for example, didn't keep kosher in a sense. And it was not unusual for most of the family to meet at Chinese restaurants on the holidays when they weren't cooking at home. So it's that kind of thing. It was very conflicted. It was New York style Judaism, I suppose.
Right. It's like keeping the old ways, but wanting to be American and blend
Basically,
in a little bit.
yeah, that was more the thing that I think that was pushed on them by their families,
Mm-hmm.
and that was understandable.
Mm-hmm.
I yeah, I just don't know how to describe it. It always struck me funny. Maybe that's why I started keeping notes of the various things that happened in my life in one way or another. I love the some of the old stories. So as my own children grew up, I wanted them to also have a Jewish background and understand, where they came from. And I had found a story, I think I had told you, called The Wisdom of Helm, which was the dumbest town. And I wrote and transferred it to Rockland County where we were living at the time.
Right.
So, yeah, in a sense, I guess I have always been writing. I just didn't realize how much of it that I had actually kept. Uh, Working with the League of Women Voters, for example, getting away from high school, I would write articles for the newspaper and even drew a editorial cartoon that was, so yeah. Uh, but getting, back to high school, it was, as I say, it was a time for dating, sweet 16 parties, New Year's Eve, my first New Year's Eve with Marv was at our friend Stan's house, and his date called just before the evening and canceled the date. She had something else she was going to be doing. So he sat around and moped all night. And we danced
Yes.
to,
What were like parties like when you were growing up? Like, what did you guys do?
uh, get together at people's houses, sit and talk, have a drink or two, or something like that.
Oh, we had
Hello,
that.
how are you? Ah,
Say
I
hi.
love a smile. I remember one night coming, you need to go to her? Or?
Oh, no, Mike's here, so she's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, Coming out of like a Sweet 16 party one night, a bunch of us piled into the elevator. Did I tell you that story?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay, what happened was there were probably about a dozen of us that had missed the floor, and we got stuck.
No.
It went all the way down to the first floor, but halfway down to the basement.
Oh no.
So we couldn't get in or we couldn't get out. We couldn't get to the door. So we finally, making noise and enough of a racket to they finally called the police and fire department and they got us out.
Oh jeez.
Things like that.
How long were you in the elevator for?
Uh, About 2 hours before it happened. I was cleaning out a box the other day, and that's what reminded me. I had a bolt from the ceiling of the elevator because we were going to try and crawl out through the top.
You kept the bolt as a memory.
That's what, yeah, exactly. Now, what made me keep that? I don't know.
So that you could tell that story.
So I can tell that story. Yes. Um, I'm trying to think of where else. What else did we do? Later on in college, I think we also did some exploring of the city, like going to places like Night Court. My girlfriends were taking some classes, and one of the boys had to go there for one of his classes. And it was an unusual night. There was a show that later came on called Night Court, and it seemed like everything we had seen that night appeared on that show. So I had a feeling that somebody in that audience that night was a writer for one of the shows. But speaking of shows, that was something else that we as a group would do. The girls, as we explored the city, was to uh, go to Broadway shows. We also went to a very risque movie, we were told, that people said it's some theater downtown. We went and saw it. It's told the story of Cabaret that became the musical Cabaret.
Hmm.
And at that time, it was considered, not something that nice people went to see. But we did anyway. We saw like New Faces of 1953 or something like that, a group of us, which had a lot of the stars that ultimately became big stars on television later on. We would went to a ballet because one of our friends was involved with ballet and loved ballet. And suddenly I broke up because one of the gals said, "Gee, I wish I brought a tape measure." I said, "For what?" She says, "I never knew those guys were that big. You know, they must be stuffing their pants. You know, kind of thing. Silly things that remind me of those days. There was always something happening. Um, I don't know what else to tell you. With regard to where else in New York. Um, I don't know. Ask me another question. We
What?
went to, during high school, places like the beach, for
Oh
example.
yeah.
Mark finally got his driver's license, for example. And we did take a ride to the beach with 9 people in the car, 3 in front and 6 in the back, including my sister who was little at the time.
6 people in
And
the back seat.
well, it, sort of sitting on laps. Carol was small, that kind of thing. We had a
Right.
couple of small and a couple of big people. But coming back after it had rained, and as he was approaching the toll booth, the brakes wouldn't stop. So we had to get everything ready and throw the money in as we went through. Finally, as the brakes dried out, it worked, and we all got home safely. Um, we would, as a dating group, there were like 6 of us. We would go out to places like beyond Coney Island and Rockaway. There were private beaches, basically town beaches, and we sometimes go further and go out there and like Stan dove in a rocky beach and hit his head naturally on a rock and was bleeding. We had to take him to the hospital.
Oh no.
Um, that was the day when I had playing tag on the beach with one of the other guys, turned quickly, and my foot went into his ankle, and I broke my middle toe. Things like that happen. Um, Mark had, I think, been at that point probably graduated and was going to Brooklyn College. And he was trying to decide what he wanted to be. He knew art was somewhere in his, so he went to work for an advertising agency for a while. And so when I would meet him for lunch. We would explore some of the restaurants in downtown and developed our favorites during the times we lived there. Um, I'm trying to think of what else. There was
Were you
a
guys
captain.
in the
Yeah,
same grade, or was he a year older than you were?
he was ahead of me in that.
Okay.
And I graduated in about 3.5 years. And I had an opportunity to have skipped a grade in junior high level, but my parents felt I should stay with my friends at the same age level rather than going to something. One of the other gals did go ahead, and it didn't make a difference, in her life. So
Yeah, no, I've heard that from like a child psychologist, that it's like you shouldn't hold them back or move them forward, because it's just because of the social development. They should be at their own age.
exactly, and that's
Yeah.
the way my parents felt then, and I didn't disagree. So
Yeah.
I didn't want to leave my friends behind. I wasn't in a rush.
Right.
So,
You
uh,
graduated in 3.5 years instead of like 4, so you.
yeah, I was able to double up in some of the things. I was already taking honors classes, as I said, and still have time to work in the counselor's office and all the rest of the stuff. So and tutor kids. Uh, so yeah, it's the learning came easy, or easier than it did to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, why I don't know. IQ. Uh,
So
IQ.
then after high school, you enrolled at Hunter College, you said?
Yeah. At that time, they had a Bronx campus that overlooked the reservoir up there, and I thought it was a lovely place to be. I would sometimes daydream looking out the window in some of the classes, which were boring, but
So did you start that like spring semester, or did you wait until the fall?
I think I started then. But while, uh, yeah, which I could do at that time, because I didn't finish college. I was there about a year and a half or whatever it was. It took me to when we decided we were going to get married. I decided I would be going to work, so I switched to Hunter at night downtown and started to work for the New York State Easter Seal Society. I applied for a job as a secretary, not knowing how to take dictation. I didn't have the skills to do that. And I said to her, the social worker that I was working for, I said, why don't you just tell me the same things that you would have if you were dictating? So, and I'll put it together. If it works for you, fine. And that's what she would do. And I would write her reports. Uh, I had no problem with it. She had no problem with it. And she would take me to lunch at least once a week because she found it fascinating that I could do that kind of thing and remember what I'd be told by her. And she wanted me to become a social worker.
Hmm.
She felt I was ideal for that because the gals in the office who were handicapped in one way or another accepted me. She said, you don't have a problem with them. She said, they don't accept me, but they accept you. Why? I said, because I don't see them as handicapped, I see them as people. And I think I began to get through to her.
So what, I mean, I know you got married and then you earlier had my dad, but why did you decide to do that and not finish college?
I didn't think it was necessary with the things that I was doing. I was involved in so many things. By the time your father and Paul were born, we moved up to Rockland County. I spent 12 years of my life on the board of the League of Women Voters with a couple of terms as president, and was very involved in running candidates' nights, sticking my 2 cents in, all sorts of governmental things. We were the first league to take a case to the U.S. Supreme Court or be part of a case on reapportionment.
Mm-hmm.
And I had written a letter with your grandfather's help to our state and national boards, legal and voter boards, to get them to set up a litigation fund because I felt that politics, even at that point, were reaching a point where lobbying, unless you had a lot of money, were not going to work, and that the way to get things resolved would have to be through the courts. And so they started a litigation fund. And when I had attended one of the conventions, one of the gals from the attorney from the national board said, it was your letter that convinced us. I said, thank you. I'm glad. We also voted at that time to allow men to join the League of Women Voters. And I fought to make sure that they did not change the name of the League of Women Voters until such time as the ERA is passed. And so the fight now, as far as I'm concerned, with who is in the White House, let's start pushing the ERA again. We need the Equal Rights Amendment,
Yeah.
period. So there I am, politicking. I haven't changed.
Good. Don't. Well, I think we're at 3:00, so we can wrap it up here, and then start back up next week. More of your college and getting married and all of that. And if you remember anything else that we left out from this week.
Being a founder of a sorority while I was at college.
To what?
I'm being a founder, one of the founders of a new sorority at college.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we'll talk about that next week. Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Good. Okay.
I did do things in my short time there.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah. Remind me also to tell you about some of the people that I met at the other one at Hunter Downtown, African princess that I used to spend time with.
Oh, wow. Yes.
And things like that. And some guy who's going to grow up to be a con man, I'm sure. So.
Well, we'll talk about that next week then.